Welcome into this Halloween edition of Bucs Insider, coming to you from the Bucs studio, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips, Scott Smith, Bree Dix, and man, we have a lot to talk about that last game. Got a big Monday Night Football game coming up. There are just a lot of storylines going on with this team right now, and one of them that has been so interesting is we were right before the show talking about how all over all sorts of national shows, local shows, everyone has been talking about this Antoine play that happened, which first of all, typical Antoine.
Apparently didn't happen, but okay.
Yeah, the Antoine play that did or didn't happen. We know this guy has been very capable of making this exact play, even against that exact team before, essentially. Why was this play not called the way a lot of Bucs fans maybe would have preferred it be called? Was that a nice way to not get fined the way I said that?
So I don't know about everybody else, but my reaction was, did Antoine do it again?
Yeah. Yep.
I think a lot of people said that because last year twice, once against Atlanta and once against Carolina, and the second one being a season-saving play, he knocked the ball out of a guy's hand in what seemed like it was a sure touchdown at the last possible moment. And then we see it again in this game, and you're seeing the replays there. He chases down Kyle Pitts on a 49-yard catch and run for what would be a touchdown. They reviewed the play, and in the end, the play stands. And we all know what that means when they announce the play stands. That means they did not feel like they had conclusive evidence
stands
to
versus
overturn
confirmed.
It. Had that been called a fumble to begin with, it probably would have stood as well. We can't get too deep into the woods about our opinions of this call since we are susceptible to fines.
We have no opinions.
But I think what was frustrating for everyone was that there was no pylon cam. And the pylon cam would shoot directly down the goal line and maybe would have given you that conclusive evidence that the ball had not crossed the line when it fell out of his hand. And the frustrating part of that is that's based on which broadcast crew you get. And the particular broadcast crew we had was not bringing a pylon cam. Now, I do believe, I'm hearing through rumors that the NFL is working to put pylon cams in every stadium and every goal line so that it's not dependent upon what broadcast cam you get. But it was frustrating. And, the secondary in a lot of ways did not have a great game. But Antoine had a chance to really make a game-changing play there, and some would say he did, but it was not overturned. And I think we'll be talking about that play for a long time. As you said, we're seeing it constantly on different national shows. They're discussing it, and I certainly hear a lot of people thinking that Antoine might have got a little robbed there.
Yeah,
people are saying, but the
people
are saying,
the mythical they are saying these things, not us.
But it does bring about thoughts of the secondary.
Yes, and so tell me your thoughts overall of, we've seen now both matchups against the Falcons. Kirk Cousins has had some pretty crazy stats, and I know the secondary, would like a few of those plays back for sure, and we saw Coach Bowles made a bit of a change in the secondary at one point, so tell us what stands out to you now having some chance to look back at it.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins, if he has a clause in his contract that pays him for Player of the Week awards, he should probably share a little bit of that with the Buccaneers because he's 2 for 2 now. The one change that was made about halfway through was Tyreek Funderburk, who started the last 2 games since Jamel Dean was sent to injured reserve. He was brought out in favor of Josh Hayes, the second-year player we drafted in the 5th round the year before. And Hayes, coach said he thought Hayes did a pretty good job. So there's a chance that Hayes will get more action moving forward. Another thing to note, the Buccaneers this week signed Troy Hill to their practice squad. That's a cornerback who has a lot of experience. He's played in like 120 games with 60 starts, so it's actually really good for the Rams in 2020. He's on the practice squad now, but we can elevate those guys. And it could be that they're looking for a little more experience there because I think for instance, Tyreek Funderburk, I think they really like Tyreek Funderburk. They liked him from the moment he got here as an undrafted free agent. But he's a young guy. Think of how good Zion McCollum is now. Zion McCollum was not this good as a rookie. It takes a little time to learn, and maybe right now isn't the time for the Bucs to be going through those growing pains in the secondary. And then the other thing is just communication. And he says, Coach Bowles and then Zion later said, it's 5 or 6 plays. Which doesn't seem like much, right? It's just 5 or 6 plays where there's a communication breakdown.
Out of 50, 60, who knows how many snaps.
Right, but 5 or 6 plays, the coaches also always say most games hinge on 5 or 6 plays.
Yeah.
So if those 5 or 6 plays are all negative for the Buccaneers, That's the difference. And so they're working on that, and I guess there could be some personnel changes.
Interesting. All right, well, I know one of the things that definitely has gone well in recent weeks, despite wins and losses, is the run game. It's been so encouraging to see multiple different guys contributing in different ways, and I know that at this point it is just par for the course for us to watch Bucky make a guy miss, make a guy miss, Bucky breaks a tackle, Bucky jukes somebody out. It's unbelievable. I mean, he's got some like Madden-like moves out there. So, Bree, tell me what you've learned about that and just the way that are our eyes deceiving us? It feels like he's doing this all the time.
No, he is. He currently leads the NFL in missed tackle rate, which it's exciting to see him have the same production that he did at Oregon, because he was 6th in college football in 2023 with 69 missed tackles forced. But to see him have that kind of production in the NFL, he's kind of helped spearhead the Bucs' resurgence on the ground. Obviously runs with great vision, contact balance. But I think he has that perfect downhill charge for those counter gap runs that have been kind of a staple this year for the Bucs. And one of my personal favorites against the Falcons was a counter play. It was a 15-yard gain. Baker Mayfield handed the ball to Bucky out of a pistol formation. Tristan Wirfs served as one of the pullers, and then he juked 2 defenders for the big gain. But also just had a lot of success off those swing passes, off the inside zone with guys kind of sealing the edge and blocking. So I think it's been exciting to see the strides that this run game has taken this year, and Bucky Irving has certainly been a big part of that.
Just right now, they just showed the 1-yard run. That was like one of the best 1-yard runs I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That play,
Should've.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not invoking the greatest running back of all time to say that he is that. But that one move there where he jumped back and like 3 defenders fell on the ground was a very Barry Sanders-like.
Yes.
He's so
I'm not
slippery.
calling him Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
And that
I'm just
short
saying.
area burst it's crazy.
You made a good point that his missed tackle rate is very similar to what he was doing in college. In his last year also, he was the best pass catching back, he had the most receptions for any running back in football, in college football. So we saw a little bit of that in this last game. I think he had 7 catches. So we're getting the full Bucky Irving experience.
Yes.
And how nice, because you talk about, we know Rashad is so good at that, of catching passes, and
fantastic.
that's probably going to be even a bigger part of what he needs to do with, no Mike, no Chris for a little bit. But you don't want it to be where if you have him out there, then suddenly people are going to start thinking that he's definitely going to be catching a pass, and then we've seen having him and Bucky back there at the same time, knowing they can both catch, they can both run, it leaves the defense a little bit more on their toes when you know that both of those guys are capable of a lot of different things, that it's not giving as much away, which is really nice. And also, I think another huge part of this offense at this point, as we've been discussing this whole last week, who's going to step up in the wake of Mike and Chris? Running backs, huge part of it, but Cade Otton, I mean, we got to give this guy his flowers, and it's been just sort of a gradual increase over each week. It's like new career high in receptions, new career high in this. Every week it's been something, and I think back to earlier in the season when Liam Cohen, jokingly said he had to apologize to Cade for not getting him more involved early on, and, I mean, man, it seems like Liam took that to heart, and suddenly Cade is way more involved and is stepping up in huge ways. He's taken massive hits in the game before this one, and then this one, it seemed like every time they needed, him to get bailed out, to bail out the offense, it was happening. Brought in career high 9 receptions for 81 yards, career high tying 2 touchdown receptions, career highs in receptions for the 2nd straight week. And then it was the 2nd time in his career that he's brought in multiple receiving touchdowns, which it's the 7th game in club history where a tight end has finished with at least 80 receiving yards and multiple touchdowns. Oh, last guy to do it, Rob Gronkowski.
Of course.
Not a terrible comparison there. And across the league, he's 5th in the league in receptions for a tight end, 7th in yards, tied for 4th in touchdowns, and of course, 1st in the league in snaps played. Right. That's the part that, of course, has just always been the case for him of this last couple of years of he is out there doing everything all the time. We give him all the flowers for when he makes those catches, but he is doing a lot of the dirty work, having to learn to block a lot more when that wasn't, always maybe his favorite thing or the thing he had done the most, but he is so reliable out there. And then I know that Coach Bowles on our show earlier this week, we were talking about Cade, and he had this to say about some of the different ways they're using him in the wake of no Mike and Chris.
He was actually running wide receiver routes, not just inside tight end routes. I mean, he was running whips, he was spinning back inside, and they were hitting. I mean, he was catching and running with the football. Cade has so much to unlock that it's exciting to see him every week, even when Mike and Chris come back. But it's exciting to see what he can do and the things he's starting to do. It's really exciting.
I also love seeing that they threw in that hurdle play for everyone to watch. So
Beautiful.
shameless plug, he came on our show on Monday as well on the Bucs Total Access show with me and Cam Brate, which also is phenomenal to watch those two guys have just such a lovely friendship on that show. Of it was a lot of fun. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. But we asked him specifically about the hurdle play, and he's like, I don't know if it was quite as good. He's so humble all the time about everything. Even that play, he's like, the guy kind of like kicked my leg up. That's why it looked like I was hurdling so much. We were like, Cade, it was
Take the
cool.
credit.
It was cool.
So also, if we're gonna shout out his play, I also feel like we had to shout out this outfit. Is this his Halloween costume? No. It's his creamsicle arrival outfit. It just was magical. The mustache fit perfectly for our little 70s theme. We had the glasses, the shirt. He credited his wife with that outfit, and I just loved it. He, look good, feel good, play good seemed to have worked for Cade in that game. So just wanted to give him a little shout out. And just overall, it's been amazing to watch Liam Cohen and the whole offense in the wake of losing Mike and Chris. That to still put up as many points and yards and have the production they had was just incredible.
Yeah, you talked about Bucky and you talked about Cade, and those are two parts of the answers. I think we saw, we didn't know during the week, could the offense continue putting up the amount of yards and continue moving the ball the way it had without Mike and Chris? And if they did, it was going to have to be in new ways, right?
Right.
Well, one of the ways is feeding Cade a little bit more. Another way is throwing more passes to the backs because both Bucky and Rashad caught a lot of passes, and then just sprinkling in, like all of the young receivers that we had out there, none of them had huge games, but they all gave you something. They all gave you like 3 catches, 40 yards, 50 yards. I thought Rakim Jarrett looked really well.
Yeah.
And in the end, the Bucs had 423 yards of offense. And they converted on 9 of 14 third downs, and right now are leading the league with a 52.5% third down conversion rate, which is incredible. And the 26 points, as Coach Bowles said after the game, should be enough to win. But that offensive performance probably should have been more than 26 points because we had Baker got intercepted twice inside the 10-yard line, and you had the fake punt that didn't work, and
The fumble early on.
the fumble by Rashad, and so you gave away opportunity. This became a shootout, and because you lost some opportunities with those turnovers to score, the points, the yards didn't add up to as many points as you would expect. But the fact that the Bucs could still move the ball regularly, on almost every drive without Mike and Chris was. If you're looking for something encouraging going forward, now that the Bucs have fallen to 4-4 in a game out of first place, to me, it's that this offense has so many different answers.
I completely agree.
And one of the things I loved and that the offense has been predicated on was the yak yards that Chris Godwin was able to achieve. And Liam Cohen even said, it's not going to be reasonable or even make sense for one person to necessarily have the same level of production. You can't replicate what Chris Godwin did.
Right.
But one of the things I loved that they did is how they used Cade Otton. Todd Bowles touched on that a little bit, but the routes that he was running were receiver routes and weren't necessarily things that he's used to doing, whether it was kind of the choice routes underneath that is something that Chris did, or the outbreakers or the corner route. But those were things that Cade did at a high level to open things up for other players, as well as what he was able to bring in the blocking game, which Chris and Mike were such a big part of.
So now I know looking to this next week, injuries still, as always, a factor. We know no Mike and Chris. Outside of that, and again, with it being Monday games, we normally would have an injury report now. We don't yet.
Yes.
So what are we going to be watching as the injury reports start coming out later today?
One of the biggest things is I would say keep an eye on Tyke Smith, who's in concussion protocol. So we'll see how he progresses this week. Coach has said that he's been making strides. And then both Levante David and Yaya Diaby exited the game against the Falcons. They were both able to come back in. So kind of seeing where those injuries were. And then Bucky Irving was limited last week leading into the game with the toe injury, but it didn't seem like he had any limitations against the Falcons. But maybe monitoring that a little bit as we move forward.
Yeah, last week Coach Bowles said that toe thing was something that Bucky's been dealing with for virtually his whole life, so it just crops up.
Seemed like he was
Yeah.
just fine last week.
He was planting okay.
I think if that was him with the toe injury, my goodness.
Yeah.
That was amazing. All right, well, let's get into our trivia. What do we have for our fans this week, Bree?
Drum roll. On November 2nd, 2008, the Buccaneers mounted the biggest comeback victory in franchise history in Kansas City, rebounding from a 24-3 deficit to win 30-27 in overtime. Who scored the first touchdown in that comeback?
I feel like this is a deep cut of
Come on, it was 2008. It wasn't that long ago.
Is this where Bree and I make a joke now about that?
This is just the second.
Maybe for you.
Is this where we say, how old were you, Bree, at this point? Should we do that, or maybe wait till after the show?
I remember this
It's our
game.
favorite game to play with Scott.
I remember this game vividly because the Chiefs were pouring it on, and they even had a 50-yard play where the running back threw a touchdown to the quarterback.
Oh, good grief.
But we came back, and
Look
we'll,
at that.
we'll explain it a little bit more later.
All
And
right,
I was in middle school.
All right, we'll have the answer
gonna
for
talk
that.
to you from
Yeah,
now
it's
on.
a two-person show now. I knew better than to at least give that date. Okay, so now also milestones. Our historian, to
Yes.
continue with this discussion. Tell me, what are some of the things that we're watching this week?
Well, we were talking about how the offense continued humming with Mike and Chris out, and for the last 3 games, the Buccaneers have had at least 300 passing yards and at least 100 rushing yards, both of those things in each of the last 3 games, which is the exact sort of balance that Liam Cohen was talking about that he wanted to achieve all offseason, and we've heard coaches say that, but the Bucs are actually doing it under him. If they can do it again this week in Kansas City, which won't be easy against a pretty good Kansas City defense, it would be the 4th time in a row that they have done that. And the last team to do that in 4 straight games was the Peyton Manning-led 2013 Denver Broncos, which was one of the best offenses we've ever seen. So it's quite an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment. That'll be interesting. Okay, so let's get into our fantasy watch, which I feel like this has been such an interesting concept, especially offensively, without Mike and Chris, of who was going to be the person that would be most likely for you to want to pick up or use because of that on the Bucs offense. So what are you looking at this week? What advice do you have
Well,
for
it's
people?
Cade Otton, and it's Thursday, so you've probably already had waiver claims in your league. You probably can't get Cade if you don't already have him. But the question is, do you start Cade Otton every week? And I think as long as Mike is out, we know Chris is out for the rest of the regular season. Yeah, I think he's a must start because those passes have to go somewhere. And you were talking about how he's taking on some of the plays that we would normally do to Chris Godwin, and obviously he's very good at those around the end zone, those 5 or 6 yard touchdown passes. And in several of them, it looks like Baker is just purposely putting that ball kind of low and outside, and he has to go down and get it. But that means no defender can get to it, and Cade clearly can make that play because he's done it every time in the last 3 weeks. He's had 3 of those plays, so I think he's a must start unless you picked him up and you also have Brock Bowers or something. But I think he's a must start. And then it's also worth noting that do you go? I know you don't play fantasy football. Baker Mayfield is the 2nd highest scoring quarterback in fantasy football this season, behind Lamar Jackson, who's Lamar Jackson was probably the first quarterback drafted in a lot of leagues because he has that running threat. And, and actually, Baker's been giving you 2, 3, 4 rushing yard points a game in fantasy because he does tend to run a little bit, right? And for those key first downs. But he's had 3 touchdown passes or more in 4 straight games. He leads the NFL in touchdown passes. If you picked up Baker Mayfield, he probably wasn't your number 1 to start the season. Maybe you had a bye week or something, But he's probably the guy you want to start now, unless you picked him up and you also have Lamar or you also have Josh Allen. But if you had, say, Patrick Mahomes and you picked up Baker, you need to start Baker over Mahomes. Mahomes is still an MVP candidate, and he's leading an undefeated team. But in terms of fantasy right now, Baker's a better play than Mahomes. Maybe you had Anthony Richardson, and he's out of the lineup now. So if you have him, unless you also have another great quarterback, you probably need to play him.
Okay. Well, let's now get into our human interest segments where we tell you guys things about the team off the field. And of course, we wanted to give a shout out to Chris Godwin. He had his foundation's gala on Monday night. So Bree, take us through that a little bit and what people might want to know to how they can help support our guy.
Yes. So Chris and Mariah Godwin held their annual gala on Monday night. A little bit more somber this year, but I think it was just exciting to see him in such high spirits. But the proceeds from the auction at the gala went towards the Most Vulnerable Pets Initiative. And then the Team Godwin Foundation aims at providing at-risk animals with financial support and advocacy to promote animal adoption. That's something that's very near and dear to both of their hearts. And he's just a guy that, we talk a lot about Levante David and the silhouette in the draft room and goes about everything the right way. But Chris Godwin is also a player, Mike Evans as well, that this team just rallies around, has an unparalleled mindset. He shows up in a splint on his left leg after undergoing surgery for the dislocated ankle. And I think one of the biggest things is, right after the injury occurred, which he's having an incredible season, was potentially on pace to get the Triple Crown. But in that moment, it isn't, woe is me, he's not screaming. He just simply said back to work to our trainers. And I think that is just an embodiment of his mentality, wanting to get back to work, wanting to put his foot forth and focusing on the things that he can control and rather than focusing on the why. But to get more information on their gala, you can go to teamgodwin.org and also click the link in the bio of the Team Godwin Foundation page on Instagram to purchase t-shirts that say back to work with his little slogan and have his silhouette. It's definitely a worthy cause.
That's great. Yeah, we're so impressed that he still had it, that does not surprise us really about their character as a family, and that they would still be thinking about those less fortunate even while he goes through this time. So yeah, we definitely encourage everyone to donate, help their foundation, and we just wish him and the family all the best, of course, in his recovery.
Saw a lot of smiles in those pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and they had pets that were up for adoption
the
also
best
that
part of
were
the
being
gala
brought
every
around,
year.
and it was incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. Every year that I go, I'm like, I need to take home 12 dogs at the end of this event. It's incredible. All right, so let's get into this next week's matchup. We are taking on the Chiefs, Monday Night Football at Arrowhead. Look, there's a million things we could talk about in this matchup. And of course, for the most part, when you think of the Chiefs, you think of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, all their offense.
Yes.
And
Christian.
for valid reasons, and we are going to get into some of that, I felt like I actually wanted to start talking about their defense because this season, that has been the strength of this team.
For sure.
Which is wild. When you think about the people that they have leading their offense, it shows you how good their defense has been. Their defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, has just done wonders with this defense of all of it. It's incredible. They are second in rush yards allowed and yards per carry, fifth in points allowed, eighth in yards per passing attempt and passing yards. And it just, last week you see they'd have a goal line stand against the Raiders that really helped secure the victory. And it's wild to think that even though they are undefeated, how many games their offense has stood at the press conference afterward and said, hey, our defense, they bailed us out, they did it, they held up, we didn't necessarily do our part. That if you were to say why they're undefeated, it really is a little bit more about their defense. Of course, Chris Jones, to your point, incredible guy that they're very lucky to have brought back, makes a huge impact. But what I will say is, while they've been one of the top units over the last couple seasons, they could use a little bit of improvement when trying to get to the quarterback. They're currently ranked 24th in sacks so far this season. They only have 15, a pretty big contrast from last season where they finished second. So this week, they added Josh Uche from the Patriots, a 4-year pro. He hasn't been going off too much this season so far. He only has a couple sacks and 10 tackles. But the Patriots have trailed a lot, and so they haven't been in a lot of situations to really get to tee off on guys. And so there's a chance he gets a lot more production now being a part of this Chiefs defense. And of course, he could get a lot more snaps right away. They've got a couple guys dealing with, Dana's dealing with a pectoral injury. Ominahu is still gearing up to return from his ACL, which he hasn't yet. So their defense has been doing this, even missing a few pieces. Now they've added another pass rusher just in time to play us, very handy. And a couple of their cornerbacks, Johnson had a concussion this last week, and their other DB, Jalen Watson, had injured his ankle and was put on injured reserve. So it'll be interesting to see what their defense looks like. New pieces, missing some pieces. Is this a chance to take advantage of a unit that has been really strong this year? But they are not going to give you a lot of opportunities to go down the field. So we just talked a lot earlier in this show about our offense and what they've been able to do. This is a heck of a test.
Yeah, I think Bill Belichick was saying after the trade that Uche hadn't been getting as many pass rush opportunities this year as in seasons past. So that could be another reason why his sack totals aren't really high, but I think that's a really quality addition for them. And their secondary playing so well is impressive because, they traded away L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason, their best cornerback, and they found ways to make it work. And I think you said at the beginning, Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, he's one of the best in the league among defensive coordinators at designing game plans specific for the offense they're going to face. So maybe the fact that the Bucs offense is in flux is a good thing right now.
Yeah.
Because it's a little harder for him to pinpoint what are the Bucs
what's
going to
happen.
do.
Yeah, that's very true. So Bree, I know again we just talked about their defense a lot. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you're watching on their offense.
Yes. So Xavier Worthy, his speed has absolutely changed the Chiefs' offense. Defenses have to account for it. And kind of one of the things that you're seeing is a lot of defenses are using kind of a too high shell coverage to try and limit the big plays over the top to Worthy, which has kind of created some opportunities for Travis Kelce underneath. He ran a record 4.21 at the combine, and he kind of uses that acceleration off the line to set up deep routes, and then he's able to work things off of them like the comeback. And Zion McCollum said this week that he struggled a little bit with when DBs play him a little bit more physically at the line. So he said that's one of the things that for the Bucs secondary this week, they're going to really try and kind of do with Xavier Worthy.
Well, that's all fine and dandy when he's lined up on the line, but what scares me, and we saw a couple of clips there, is the end arounds.
Yeah.
If he hits that corner with that 4.21 speed, I mean, if he finds the seam, he's gone.
He's gone.
I think those are the plays that scare me most about Worthy.
And especially while Jamel Dean is hurt, he's your fastest
Right. Well,
guy in the
Zion-
secondary.
Right.
I think, well, that would be a fun debate.
It's close,
I
right?
think Jamel would tell you he's the fastest. I'm sure Zion would tell
Right.
you he's the fastest. But yeah, I mean, it would be great if you had both of them out
Right.
there
Right.
to have more of a chance, but that's definitely going to be interesting. All right, so how about otherwise offensively? There's like we said, some guys you recognize their names. What level are some of these guys playing
This
at?
guy, I didn't really know much about him until he started dating Taylor Swift.
That's when he got put on your radar.
Right,
yeah.
right. That's when I, Instagram and everything. I don't really know what Instagram is, but Travis Kelce, last year, the whole story. So Travis is 35 this year. He just turned 35 like earlier this month. Last year he was 34, and people were saying, is this finally the year Travis Kelce falls off the cliff? He didn't get 1,000 yards for the first time since like 2016. He averaged a career low like 10.2 yards per catch. And then in the playoffs, all of a sudden, there's Travis Kelce, superstar again, and he went ballistic. So this year, first 3 games only had like 8 catches, and so you hear the whispers again, maybe Travis Kelce's finally washed. Well, 3 of the last 4 games, he's had at least 7 catches. Last game, he was his best one of the season so far. I think he had 10 catches for 90 yards, something like that. He's really, really heating up, and this is very important because at the beginning of the year, Rashee Rice had become that guy for Patrick Mahomes, who was your underneath guy, your guy that you hit him in ways that he could get yak, and that's traditionally something that Travis Kelce has always been for Mahomes. Well, Rashee Rice is out now on injured reserve, out for the year, and now it seems like it's gone back to Mahomes trusting Kelce and getting the ball to Kelce on those plays. So definitely a challenge, and as we've seen just last week, tight ends can sometimes be a problem for us on defense.
It's very true. I asked Cade and Cam about him, of course, on our show, all the tight ends talking about each other. And Cade said it is so frustrating to watch him because he does all these things you're not supposed to do. That he said by the rule book of what you should do as a tight end.
And you know how Cade feels about that.
Yeah, of course, Cade is Mr. like, by the book, X's and O's, tell me what to do, I will do it. And he's like, he does everything you're not supposed to do. And then it works. It's so irritating. And I imagine that is challenging for defenses because if you have in your mind this idea of what a tight end should do and you prepare for that.
You've got keys.
Then it's so different. But yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. Prime time at Arrowhead. That is always going to be a fun one. All right, so let's close here with our answer to our trivia question. What do we got?
Have y'all ever heard of a player named Clifton Smith? Yeah, you have?
I have not.
Okay, Clifton Smith was an undrafted free agent that year in 2008. He was on the practice squad. He was a very, very small running back out of San Diego, something like that. I can't remember for sure. And we had drafted a guy named Dexter Jackson, not that Dexter Jackson, but a different Dexter
Which
Jackson.
is amazing. What are the odds?
And he was a young receiver from Appalachian State who was supposed to be a punt returner and kick returner, but he really was not having a good year at all. So about halfway through, they brought Clifton up, gave him the job, and he did so well that by the end of the year, he was the Pro Bowler for the NFC as the return man. And part of that was a 97-yard kickoff return against the Chiefs just before halftime when we were down 24-3. That made it 24-10, ignited the rally that led to that 30-27 overtime victory.
I love it.
Biggest comeback it remains the biggest comeback in franchise history.
That is awesome. All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. We hope everyone has a very safe and fun Halloween, and we'll see you next time.